Another thing in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood that got controversial was the Bruce Lee scene.
You about a man who could knock someone flying across a room with just a 1-inch punch?
He was a kung fu martial artist.
Or someone who could do push-ups using only 2 fingers? Maybe you'd hear
You want to fight? I'll take you on.
about a fighter who moved so fast that cameras couldn't even capture his movements properly. You'd probably think I was telling fairy tales or making up stories to impress you. But what if I showed you actual video footage of all these impossible things happening right before your eyes? What if these weren't just wild stories passed down through word of mouth, but real events that were filmed and documented? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore today, because Bruce Lee wasn't just any ordinary martial artist or movie star. Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today we're going to look at the most incredible Bruce Lee moments that people refuse to believe until they actually saw the proof with their own eyes. These aren't movie stunts with wire work or special effects. These aren't exaggerated tales that grew bigger over time. These are real demonstrations of ability that seem to break the laws of what we think the human body can do. By the time we finish this video, you'll understand why Bruce Lee became a legend that people are still talking about more than 50 years later. So let's start with the most famous demonstration that made people question everything they thought they knew about fighting and physics. It was called the 1-inch punch, and when people first heard about it, they thought it was completely impossible. How could someone create real power and force from such a tiny distance? Most people need to wind up their arm and put their whole body into a punch to make any real impact. Bruce Lee proved that sometimes the most amazing things happen in the smallest spaces. Picture this scene. Bruce would stand calmly in front of a volunteer, usually someone much bigger and heavier than himself. He would place his closed fist just 1 inch away from their chest, barely touching their shirt. There was no dramatic preparation, no running start, no big movements at all. It looked like he was just gently resting his hand against the person. Then, with what appeared to be the tiniest movement you could imagine, Bruce would extend his arm forward that single inch. What happened next shocked everyone who witnessed it. The volunteer would suddenly shoot backward like they had been hit by an invisible cannonball. They would crash into chairs that had been placed behind them for safety, sometimes sliding several feet across the floor. The audience would go completely silent for a moment, trying to understand what they had just seen. Then the room would explode with amazement and confused chatter. Many people's first reaction was to assume this had to be some kind of magic trick. Maybe the volunteers were secretly working with Bruce and just pretending to be knocked back. Maybe there was some hidden mechanism or special effects involved. But this wasn't a magic show or a movie set. This was real physics being demonstrated by someone who understood the human body better than almost anyone else in history. Bruce wasn't relying on big muscles or brute force like most people expected. Instead, he had spent years learning how to use his entire body as one perfectly coordinated machine. When he performed that 1-inch punch, the power actually started all the way down his feet. The force traveled up through his legs, into his hips, through his core muscles, across his shoulders, down his arm, and finally exploded out through his knuckles in one smooth, lightning-fast chain reaction. Scientists who studied Bruce's technique later explained that he had mastered something called biomechanics, which is the science of how bodies move and create force. Most people only use their arm muscles when they punch, which limits how much power they can generate. But Bruce had trained every part of his body to work together perfectly, like all the parts of a well-built machine working in harmony. Even today, martial artists from all over the world study footage of Bruce's 1-inch punch and try to copy what he did. They practice for hours, sometimes for years, trying to understand the secret. But very few people have ever come close to matching Bruce's results. Most of them can barely move their target at all, let alone send someone flying across a room. This wasn't just about learning the right technique or understanding the science behind it. Bruce had developed something special through years of perfect practice that couldn't be easily copied. Now, if the 1-inch punch wasn't impressive enough to convince you that Bruce Lee was operating on a completely different level than normal people, let me tell you about something even more incredible. We're talking about his famous two-finger push-ups, and this demonstration of strength is so extreme that it still seems impossible even when you're watching it happen. Think about regular push-ups for a moment. Most people find them challenging because you're lifting your entire body weight using your chest, arm, and core muscles. Your hands are flat on the ground with all 10 fingers helping to support and balance your weight. Even for people who exercise regularly, doing more than a few dozen push-ups without stopping is pretty difficult. Now imagine trying to do push-ups while balancing your entire body weight on just 2 fingers from each hand. It sounds completely ridiculous, right? The human fingers aren't designed to support that kind of pressure and weight. Most people would expect their fingers to break or at least cause severe pain and injury. But Bruce Lee didn't just do 2-finger push-ups once as a party trick to show off that in front of amazed audiences. Bruce would calmly get down into a push-up position on the floor. But instead of placing his palms flat on the ground like everyone else, he would carefully balance his entire body weight on just his index finger and middle finger from each hand. His other fingers would curl up, not touching the floor at all. Then, with perfect control and no visible strain or shaking, he would slowly lower his body down until his chest almost touched the ground. After holding that position for a moment, Bruce would smoothly push himself back up to the starting position, making the whole thing look as easy as breathing. But here's the part that really shocked people who knew about his training. Bruce could perform 200 of these impossible 2-finger push-ups in a row without stopping. And when it came to regular push-ups using both hands normally, witnesses claimed he could complete 1,500 in a single training session. These numbers sound so unbelievable that most people assumed they had to be exaggerated stories that grew bigger over time. But the film demonstrations of his 2-finger push-ups proved that Bruce's strength was on a level that most people couldn't even imagine. His finger strength alone was stronger than most people's entire arms. Why would anyone train in such an extreme and unusual way? For Bruce, this wasn't about showing off or impressing people, although it certainly did both of those things. He believed that every single part of his body needed to be incredibly strong and perfectly controlled. If he could do push-ups using just 2 fingers, then using his whole hand would feel completely effortless. If he could balance his entire body weight on tiny points of contact, then his balance and coordination would be unbeatable in any fighting situation. This kind of training also develops something that most fighters never think about, which is incredible grip strength. When Bruce grabbed an opponent or blocked a punch, his hands felt like steel clamps rather than human flesh. People who sparred with him often described the experience as being caught by a machine rather than a person. But Bruce Lee wasn't just about impressive demonstrations and training exercises. People always wondered whether his incredible skills would actually work in real fighting situations against trained opponents who were seriously trying to hurt him. Could he really use these abilities when it mattered most? Fortunately, we have some amazing footage that answers this question perfectly. In 1967, at the Long Beach International Karate Championships, Bruce stepped onto the mats for a sparring session that happened to be filmed. This wasn't a movie set with carefully planned choreography in multiple takes to get everything perfect. This was a real martial arts competition with actual oppo. Ninja were doing their best to land strikes on Bruce. He wasn't following a script or acting out predetermined moves. This was just Bruce being himself in a real fighting situation. What the camera captured was absolutely incredible to watch. Bruce moved with a kind of calmness that seemed almost supernatural. While his opponents would charge forward with aggressive attacks and obvious effort, Bruce would simply step to the side at exactly the right moment, making them miss by just inches. It was like he could see into the future and knew exactly where they were going to attack before they even started moving. His counterattacks were like surgical strikes. Bruce would wait patiently for the perfect opening to appear, then strike with lightning speed and perfect accuracy. Every movement he made had a clear purpose. There was no wasted energy, no wild swinging, and no unnecessary showboating. He would move just enough to avoid danger and strike just hard enough to make his point without causing serious injury. What made this footage so remarkable was how controlled and precise everything looked. In movies, fight scenes are designed to look exciting and dramatic, with lots of obvious impacts and exaggerated movements. But watching Bruce's real sparring was completely different. It looked more like an advanced chess match, where Bruce was always thinking several moves ahead of his opponents. The most impressive part was how Bruce seemed to predict what his opponents would do before they even knew it themselves. He would start moving to avoid an attack before his opponent had even begun to throw it. This wasn't luck or guessing. Bruce had spent years training his mind to read body language, recognize fighting patterns, and react faster than most people could even think. His opponents looked like they were moving in slow motion compared to his lightning-fast responses. This brings us to one of the most famous and controversial fights in Bruce Lee's entire career. It happened in 1964 in Oakland, California, and while no cameras were present to record it, the story has become legendary among martial arts fans around the world. Bruce faced off against a highly skilled Chinese martial artist named Wong Jack Man in what became known as the Wong Jack Man Challenge fight. The fight took place behind closed doors in a private location with only a handful of witnesses present, including Bruce's wife Linda. According to her detailed account of what happened, the fight began in a traditional way with both fighters bowing to each other to show respect. But once the actual fighting started, things became intense very quickly. Wong Jack Man attacked first using sharp, straight punches with traditional Wing Chun techniques that he had learned in China. These were precise, technical strikes from someone who had trained for many years in classical martial arts. But Bruce's response was immediate and overwhelming. His punches landed harder and faster than Wong had expected, and it became clear within just a few minutes that Wong was having serious trouble keeping up with Bruce's speed and power at one point during the fight. Wong apparently tried to create distance by moving away, but Bruce pursued him relentlessly and eventually brought the fight to the ground. The entire encounter ended with Wong surrendering, having been clearly outmatched by Bruce's superior skills. However, Wong Jack Man later told a very different version of these events. He claimed that the fight wasn't nearly as one-sided as Bruce's supporters described, and that he hadn't been defeated as convincingly as they claimed. Since no cameras were present and only a few people witnessed what really happened, we'll probably never know the complete truth. The reality likely falls somewhere between these two conflicting accounts. What we do know for certain is that this fight had a profound impact on Bruce's development as a martial artist. Even though he apparently won the encounter, Bruce realized that his skills still weren't perfect. He needed to become faster, stronger, and more complete as a fighter if he wanted to reach his full potential. Speaking of things that Bruce initially dismissed but later mastered, let's talk about his incredible relationship with nunchucks. When his training partner Dan Inosanto first introduced Bruce to these traditional Okinawan weapons, Bruce wasn't impressed at all. He thought they were clumsy, impractical tools that were more about showing off than actual fighting effectiveness. But Dan insisted that Bruce give them a fair chance, so Bruce agreed to train with nunchucks for a few months. What happened next was typical Bruce Lee. Once he committed to learning something, he didn't just get good at it, he became absolutely incredible. Within 3 months, Bruce had completely mastered the nunchucks and could use them with speed and control that seemed impossible. By 1971, when Bruce starred in Fist of Fury, audiences got their first look at his nunchuck skills, and they were absolutely amazed. The weapons spun and whirled in Bruce's hands like they were alive. He didn't just swing them around randomly like most people do. Instead, he made them dance through the air with perfect timing and incredible precision. In his later film Game of Death, Bruce had an on-screen nunchuck battle with Dan Inosanto that showcased both of their skills. The scene was like watching two masters play a deadly game, with nunchucks flying through the air in patterns that looked like controlled chaos. Audiences couldn't look away because they had never seen weapons used with such artistry and effectiveness. But perhaps the most famous nunchuck demonstration that Bruce ever did wasn't even from a movie. There's footage of Bruce playing ping pong using nunchucks instead of paddles. He would stand calmly at the table, blocking and returning every shot with perfect timing and aim. The ping pong ball would bounce off the nunchucks like they were made specifically for the game. Many people thought this footage had to be fake because it seemed too impossible to be real. But Bruce had reached a level of skill where he could make even the most ridiculous challenges look easy. His hand-eye coordination, timing, and control were so perfect that he could use nunchucks for things they were never designed to do. Now let's talk about a story that shows just how dangerous Bruce could. LDB, when he was pushed too far. In Seattle in 1960, when Bruce was still a young student, a Japanese black belt named Yoichi Nakachi challenged him to a fight. Bruce tried to avoid the confrontation because he didn't want trouble, but Nakachi kept pushing and insulting him. Finally, Nakachi sent Bruce a message saying that if he wanted to end up in the hospital, he should accept the challenge. Bruce had enough. He accepted the fight, and they met at a local YMCA handball court. Only a few people were allowed to watch what happened next. The entire fight lasted just 11 seconds. Bruce struck with incredible speed and power. One kick to Nakachi's nose, followed by a devastating blow to his head. Nakachi dropped to the floor immediately. The aftermath was shocking. Blood was everywhere. Nakachi's skull was cracked, and his face was so swollen that he was barely recognizable. For a terrifying moment, Bruce thought he might have actually killed his opponent. Fortunately, Nakachi survived, but he was seriously injured and required immediate medical attention. This fight was never made public, and there were no photos or videos taken. The only reason we know about it today is because Bruce wrote about it in his personal journal. If he hadn't documented it himself, this incredible demonstration of his fighting ability would have been lost to history. Bruce's kicking power was just as devastating as his punches, and we have some amazing footage that proves it. During training sessions, Bruce would practice on heavy sandbags that weighed 45 kilograms. These bags are designed to absorb tremendous amounts of force without moving very much. But when Bruce kicked them, something extraordinary would happen. His kicks were so powerful that the sandbags wouldn't just swing back and forth like they were supposed to. Instead, they would completely snap off their chains and go flying through the air. On one occasion, Bruce kicked a 135-kilogram sandbag so hard that it flew 5 meters into the air. This feat actually made it into the Guinness World Records as one of the most powerful kicks ever documented. Bruce called his signature technique the super side kick, and it was absolutely devastating in its power and speed. The force required to launch something that heavy through the air is almost impossible to imagine. Most professional fighters couldn't even budge a bag that size, but Bruce could send it flying without any visible effort. Here's something that might be the most incredible Bruce Lee story of all, and it shows just how extraordinary his speed really was. When Bruce first appeared on the television show The Green Hornet, something very strange happened during filming. The cameras couldn't capture his movements properly. His punches and kicks were so fast that they didn't register on film. Back in the 1960s, cameras filmed at 24 frames per second, which was fast enough to capture normal human movement. But Bruce moved faster than 24 frames per second. His strikes were so quick that they would happen between the frames, making it look like he hadn't moved at all. Viewers would see Bruce in one position. Then suddenly his opponent would be reacting to a strike, but the actual attack would be invisible. The film crew initially thought their equipment was broken or that the footage was damaged somehow. But the problem wasn't technical, it was Bruce. He was literally too fast for the cameras to capture his true speed. The producers had to ask Bruce to slow down his movements so that audiences could actually see what he was doing. This was incredibly frustrating for Bruce because he wanted people to see his real abilities, not a slowed-down version. Later, when he made his own movies like Enter the Dragon, he solved this problem by filming fight scenes at higher frame rates. This allowed his true speed to be captured and displayed properly for audiences. Finally, let's talk about what made all of these incredible abilities possible. Bruce Lee's training routine. This wasn't just regular exercise or casual practice. Bruce approached training like a scientist studying the human body's limits and then systematically breaking through them. Every single day was carefully planned with specific goals and purposes. Bruce would run up to 6 miles on some days to build his cardiovascular endurance. On other days, he would ride his bicycle for 10 miles, then spend 20 minutes jumping rope to improve his coordination and footwork. This was just his warm-up. His flexibility training was legendary. Bruce could do full splits while sitting on chairs, bend forward until his chest touched his knees, and kick a 7-foot-tall man in the head. This incredible flexibility wasn't natural. It was the result of hours of daily stretching and mobility work. His strength training was completely focused on function rather than appearance. Bruce lifted weights not to build big muscles, but to make his strikes more powerful and his body more resilient. He didn't want to look strong. He wanted to be genuinely dangerous in fighting situations. Every day included punching drills, kicking practice, and shadow boxing sessions where Bruce would fight imaginary opponents to perfect his technique. He would study his own movements, identify weaknesses, and constantly push himself to improve. People often said Bruce was naturally talented, but the truth is that he was obsessed with perfection and willing to work harder than anyone else to achieve it. Bruce trained like a man who was chasing something that couldn't be caught, yet somehow he managed to catch it anyway. His dedication wasn't just about becoming a better fighter or a more famous actor. He was pursuing a kind of physical and mental perfection that most people can't even imagine. Oh, there you have it. The punch that needed no wind-up, the push-ups done on just 2 fingers, the kicks that sent heavy bags flying through the air, the fights with no rules, the movements too fast for cameras to capture, and the training routine of someone who refused to accept human limitation. If these moments hadn't been recorded or documented, they would sound like complete fiction. But they weren't fiction. They were real demonstrations of what one human being could achieve through incredible dedication, perfect technique, and an absolute refusal to accept that anything was impossible. Bruce Lee didn't just act tough in movies. He existed beyond what most people thought was possible for the human body and mind. Which of these stories shocked you the most? Did the 1-inch punch blow your mind? Or were you more impressed by his 2-finger push-ups? Maybe the story about being too fast for cameras was the most unbelievable thing you heard today. Let us know in the comments below what amazed you most about Bruce Lee's incredible abilities. That if you enjoyed learning about these mind-blowing Bruce Lee stories, make sure to hit that like button to help support our channel. Share this video with your friends and family who love martial arts or incredible human achievement stories. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest videos about amazing people who push the boundaries of what seemed possible. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.